Now let's look at this. Were Jews involved in the transatlantic slave trade? Here's a book. Research by Brother Alan Hammett. The secret relationship between blacks and Jews. You need to get this book. This brother did not quote any black man. He quoted from the writings of Jewish scholars and rabbis. Jews, so-called, I'm going to call them so-called, like we so-called Negroes. So-called Jews were intimately involved in the destruction of the black nation. We have collected many documents proving this fact. We only put out book 1, but we got book 2 and book 3 that highlights what so-called Jews have done to put you and me in the condition that we're in, and the world in the condition that the world is in. I'm talking about the synagogue of Satan. I didn't want to run this down last week because I didn't want you all to think that I'm anti-Semitic. But I think I've laid a base now for you to understand that I don't hate Jewish people. But I definitely have a problem with so-called Jews and so-called Christians and so-called Muslims. Christopher Columbus was financed by wealthy Jews. He captured and enslaved hundreds of Indians who were auctioned by one of these Jews when Columbus returned to Spain, on pages 11 through 17 in this book. Jews made several major contracts for the transatlantic shipment of black Africans to colonial settlements in the New World. Jews insured and financed slave ships and outfitted them with chains and shackles. Jews controlled the trade in the American colonies, including sugar, cotton, coffee, tobacco, molasses, and rum. The largest slave shipments brought into New York in the first half of the 18th century were brought in by Jews. In South America, in Suriname, 100 families of Jews own 9,000 Africans. And they protested when the Gentile authorities decreed that the slaves should have a day off. In Suriname, the Jews set up militias just to fight the Maroons. The Maroons in Jamaica, the Maroons in Brazil. In fact, most Africans were shipped to Brazil, possibly 9 out of every 10, where Jewish planters owned vast plantations. Slave auctions were held at a regular schedule, but the auctions were postponed when it was a Jewish holiday because there wasn't enough buyers or sellers to hold the auction. I want you to hear this. Brother Akbar, Elmina, in Cape Coast, on all the doors that they've changed now, what was on the door of most of the slave dungeons? What did you say? A Jewish Star of David. 75% of Jews own slaves in the South. Jews in Newport, that's Rhode Island, owned all 22 rum distilleries engaged in the triangular slave trade. Jews owned slave pens where they warehoused Africans and sold them by the gangs. Jews were commission merchants, brokers, wholesalers, slave clothing dealers, and peddlers, keeping the slave economy oiled with money, markets, and supply. This is why they don't want you talking about reparations. See, but if the Jews can receive reparations from Germany for a 12-year Holocaust, what should the Jews be paying black people for 400 years? The synagogue of Satan. There's so much more, but get the book. But look at this. The Jews, rabbis, were the fathers of the Hamitic curse. Now I gotta say a little bit more on that this week, because it's most important that you understand exactly what was done. See, the slave market financed Europe and England in particular. Slavery financed the 13 colonies that became the United States. So when the present generation of white people tell you they don't owe us nothing, let's talk to the government. They became rich and powerful selling black bodies, breeding slaves. African slavery was the cornerstone of the development of European colonial enterprises in the West Indies, Central and South America, and the English colonies that became America. The European nations that participated in the transatlantic slave trade were Portugal, Spain, Holland, France, and England. The English conquered and enslaved the islands of Barbados, St. Kitts, Nevis, Antigua, Montserrat, and Jamaica. The French conquered Martinique, Guadeloupe, St. Lucia, Grenada, and St. Dominique. They all had a part. So they all have to be called to account.